"Hi, my name's Keller, and the last words my mother said to me were, 'You'll crawl back.'" She was wrong. Right after graduation, they threw me out for wanting to build something of my own. No goodbye, no help, just a slammed door and a father who looked away. 7 years later, after I built a $42 million company from scratch, they weren't proud. They were terrified of the truth getting out. But the worst part? They didn't come to apologize. They came to erase me. So, how far would your own parents go to silence you? I woke up before the sun, my sheets tangled around my legs like the future I was about to escape. It was graduation day, the day that was supposed to feel like freedom. Instead, my stomach turned with something closer to dread. Downstairs, the coffee was already brewing. That was my mother's doing. Ruth Ann didn't believe in sleeping in, not even for milestones. She said people who rested too long lost the race before it started. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the machine and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. I remember thinking how even time seemed nervous around her. I pulled on my navy gown and adjusted the cap, checking my reflection. 18 in 2 weeks. But I looked older. Or maybe just more tired. I didn't hear a "you look handsome" or even a "ready for today" from either of them. Just footsteps behind me, a rushed "let's go or we'll hit traffic," and the click of her heels leading the way. My father, Corwin, stood by the door with his arms crossed, keys already in hand, saying nothing. That was his role. Silent, looming, and final. The auditorium smelled like cheap folding chairs and anticipation. Parents held up signs, cried into tissues, tossed balloons in the air. But not mine. Ruth Ann and Corwin arrived late, her face already twisted with irritation about parking, the crowd, the heat. "This is why I told them to hold it indoors," she hissed, as if someone was listening. When I scanned the crowd from the stage, trying to find their faces, I found only indifference. My classmates waved to their families. Some cried. I searched again. No wave, no smile. My father sat motionless. My mother was checking her watch. The ceremony ended in a blur. I didn't remember the speech. I remember the silence afterward. They took me to dinner, or what started as dinner. A modest place I picked myself, one I thought wouldn't embarrass them. We sat down, menus handed out, water poured. I tried to make small talk, thanking them for coming. Ruth Ann looked at her phone, sighed. 10 minutes in, she set her utensils down. "I have somewhere more important to be," she said flatly, as if she was late for something life-saving. She pushed her plate away, untouched. Corwin stood the moment she did, without a word. I hadn't even ordered yet. I didn't argue. What would be the point? I folded my napkin, placed it on the table, and followed them out. In the car, the silence was thicker than the Ohio humidity. Then Ruth Ann broke it. "So, what now?" I hesitated. My hands gripped the fabric of my gown. "I want to start building something. I've been coding. I want to launch a tech startup." She scoffed. "I've already lined up a mentor, and I think—" She turned in her seat, eyes sharp. "So you're rejecting the program we enrolled you in? The one your father pulled strings for?" Corwin didn't look at me. His jaw clenched, a signal more than a statement. "I never agreed to it," I said quietly. The silence this time felt colder. Not empty, sharp, like ice cracking beneath your feet. Back at home, extended family had already arrived for pictures. My cousins, aunts, uncles, all lined up, the air filled with camera flashes and congratulations. I stood off to the side, waiting for someone to call me over. Someone did, but not how I expected. Let's take one with the real kids first, my aunt said. The others laughed, the kind of laugh people use when they're saying something they shouldn't, but feel safe doing it anyway. Ruth Ann didn't correct her. She didn't even flinch. I waited, but the photo snapped without me. Later that night, I stood at the kitchen sink, twisting a glass of water in my hand, watching the condensation run down my fingers like slow tears I refused to shed. I turned to Ruth Ann. Why is it so wrong to choose something for myself? She didn't look up. Because you're not special enough to gamble. Corwin, now standing behind her, added without blinking, a son who won't follow the plan is no son at all. That line broke something. I don't remember shouting. I remember the silence right before it happened. The kind that comes before a door slams or a car crash. Corwin walked into the hallway, grabbed my small black graduation bag, the only thing I'd packed, and tossed it onto the front porch. Ruth Ann held my spare key between two fingers, walked over, and let it fall to the floor with a small metallic click. Take it, she said. Not that you'll ever use it. Then the door closed. Not slammed. Closed. Like a verdict being read. I stood there, one hand still on the knob, staring at the wood grain as if it might change its mind. It didn't. Dusk wrapped around me as I walked down the street. Graduation cap still on. Bag slung over my shoulder. No plan, just one truth. I wasn't going to crawl back. They'd made sure there was no door left to return through. I had no home to return to, but I still had one thing they could never take from me. My name, Keller Reese. I whispered it to myself as I walked along the edge of the sidewalk, suitcase wheels rattling unevenly over the cracks in the pavement. Streetlights flickered to life one by one, casting halos over the quiet houses that lined the road. Inside, I caught glimpses of lives still intact, families laughing, kitchens buzzing, music playing low. Graduation balloons hovered near ceilings. Dinners were still warm. Their worlds spun forward. Mine had stopped cold. The air was thick with late spring heat, but my skin felt chilled. I hadn't processed what happened yet, how fast it all came undone. I'd left that house with my bag, my broken key, and a career dream that now felt like a joke no one was laughing at. I kept walking. I didn't know where I was going, just that stopping wasn't an option. After about 30 minutes, I found a corner gas station that looked older than the town itself. Its sign buzzed faintly. The lights inside hummed a low yellow glow. No one was around. I slipped behind the building, out of sight, and dropped my suitcase beside the dumpster. I sat on the concrete curb, pulled out my wallet, and counted. $43. That was it. All I had from the tutoring gigs I'd squeezed in between school and pretending to follow the plan they'd chosen for me. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking, not from fear exactly, more like the slow realization that I had no backup. I tapped Mom. She declined. I tried again. Declined. I stared at the screen, waiting for a message. None came. I scrolled to Emily. My sister. She always played both sides growing up. She was the golden child, did what she was told, climbed the ladder, and never looked back. I wasn't asking for much, just a night, a couch, something. She didn't answer. I let the phone fall to my lap and leaned back against the wall, looking up at the sky. The stars had started to come out. I used to love that. The quiet, the space. But tonight, the silence felt like it had teeth. I stood up and walked inside the gas station, pretending like I belonged. I grabbed a bottled water and a microwaved sandwich from the cooler. At the register, I handed over my card without thinking. Declined. I blinked, tried again. Declined. The clerk looked at me, then at the screen. You want to try another one, man? I opened my banking app. A red banner flashed. Account suspended. Please contact your primary guardian. They cut me off. Just like that. A flush of heat rose to my face. My chest tightened. I turned away quickly, mumbling something about forgetting my PIN. I grabbed my bag and rushed out before I could humiliate myself further. I sat back behind the station, staring at my phone. I typed out a message to Emily. Me, can you please call me? Just need to talk. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared. Emily, Mom said you chose this. Don't drag me into it. I waited, staring, hoping she'd send something else. An apology, a question, anything. It came. Emily, and don't show up at my place. I have my own problems. That was it. I sat there frozen, the screen still glowing in my hand. I didn't feel anger. Not yet. Just a strange emptiness, like the bottom dropped out of everything I thought was real. I stayed behind the building until my legs got stiff and my back ached. Then I picked up my bag and started walking again, feet dragging, eyes blurry. A few blocks down, I found a lonely metal bench under a flickering street lamp, the kind you'd only sit on if you had nowhere else. I dropped my bag to the side and sat down. This was it. My first night without a roof. My first night as a ghost in my own life. I leaned forward, elbows on knees, and thought about what my mother said over the years. You don't have to be brilliant, just obedient. My father never said it out loud, but he lived it. They didn't want a son. They wanted a replica. I was never a person to them, just a project. And once the project stopped following the instructions, it was scrapped. I pulled out a worn notebook from the side pocket of my suitcase, the one I'd kept hidden in the back of my closet. Pages full of sketches, code ideas, business models. I flipped through them slowly, fingers tracing the lines like they might anchor me. One quote sat on the inside cover, in faded ink. If no one opens the door, build one. Mr. Dorsey wrote that during my sophomore year, after I stayed late explaining a bug I fixed in the school's scheduling system. He said I had a mind that could change the world if I didn't let it get buried. I looked around. Empty street, hum of distant cars. The world had gotten very small, but that quote felt big enough to hold on to. I pressed the notebook to my chest and leaned back against the bench. It was cold. The metal seeped through my shirt. But I didn't move. If I could make it through this night, I could make it through anything. That night, I lost my family. But by sunrise, I gained something far more powerful. Not strength exactly, more like the first quiet pulse of self-respect. It was small, but it was mine, and it carried me into the gray morning air. I lifted my head from the bench as the streetlights dimmed. My back felt stiff, and every part of me ached from the cold metal. Cars rolled past, people heading to early shifts or grocery runs. Each engine hum reminded me how the world kept moving, even when your life hit a wall. I pushed myself upright, rubbed my eyes, and tried to make sense of how fast everything collapsed. Less than a day ago, I walked across a stage in a cap and gown. Now I sat on a bench with a suitcase and no idea what came next. My throat felt dry, and the little water I had taken the night before was long gone. I stood slowly, grabbed the handle of my bag, and followed the sidewalk until I reached a bus stop with a faded route map. I studied it, blinking against the rising sunlight. I needed somewhere to think, somewhere with power outlets and a roof. The community library opened early most days. It wasn't close, but it was reachable on foot. I started walking, each step waking my legs from the long, cold night. The neighborhood shifted from cul-de-sacs to smaller houses, then to rows of shops not yet open. When I reached the library, the automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh. Warm air spilled over me. It felt like stepping into another universe, one built on silence instead of shouting. I found a corner table near an outlet and plugged in my phone. While it powered up, I looked around. Kids' drawings hung on the bulletin board. Newspapers were neatly stacked. Everything was calm, organized, safe in a way my house never was. Once my phone turned on, I opened social media, thinking maybe someone had posted photos from graduation that might distract me from the night I just lived. Friends had shared plenty, group shots, smiling faces, caps tossed in the air. I kept scrolling until I reached my mother's page. I was expecting at least one picture of the evening. She documented everything, especially if it made our family look polished. But as I scrolled, something felt wrong. There were albums from holidays, birthdays, summer gatherings. My cousins, my parents, my sister, not me, not just last night. I wasn't in a single family photo for the past 3 years. It didn't make sense at first, and then it did in a way that made my stomach drop. Pictures I knew I'd been present for, gone, cropped, replaced. It wasn't an accident, it was deliberate. I leaned back in the chair, feeling the weight of it hit in waves. They didn't erase me yesterday. They'd been erasing me slowly, quietly, while I still lived under their roof. I whispered to myself, barely audible, "They edited me out of their story." The words tasted bitter, but they were true. My chest tightened and I felt a rush of heat behind my eyes. I blinked it back. I wasn't going to fall apart in the middle of a library. I closed the app and swallowed hard, trying to ground myself. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the table, letting the truth sink deeper. After a long minute, I opened the extended family group chat, hoping maybe someone asked about me. Maybe someone noticed I wasn't in the photos. The thread was buzzing. "It was nice seeing the whole family yesterday," someone wrote. "Everyone looked great." I scrolled up from the beginning of the day. The pictures my mother sent were all the same ones I'd just seen online. Not one included me. A few seconds later, an aunt typed, "Did Keller not attend?" I could almost predict my mother's answer before I read it. "He had other plans. He's been distant for a long time." The room tilted a little. I gripped the edge of the table, grounding myself. My mother wasn't just leaving me out. She was rewriting the entire story, so she didn't look cruel. She didn't mention pushing my plate away. She didn't mention cutting off my accounts. She didn't mention my suitcase in the yard. She wanted the world to think I walked out. I stood up too fast, chair scraping quietly against the carpet. My hands trembled as I headed to the restroom. Once inside a stall, I locked the door and sat on the closed toilet lid. My breath came slow at first, then quicker as my chest tightened. I didn't cry loud. No sobs, just a quiet breaking inside, like something old and fragile finally giving way. After a while, the rush began to settle. I ran my hands through my hair and stared down at the tiled floor. I whispered, "If they can rewrite me out of their lives, I can write myself into something better." Saying it out loud steadied me somehow. I wiped my face with my sleeve, stood up, and stepped out into the hallway. The air felt clearer. Back at the table, I opened a library computer and searched for part-time jobs. Most required a car or experience I didn't have. I widened the search to gig work, flyer distribution, small errands, anything to get by. Then I checked youth shelters, wait lists everywhere. Last, I opened a coding forum. I posted a simple message from a temporary account. High school grad with basic programming skills willing to help build small tools. Low rates. I didn't expect anything. But within minutes, one reply appeared. A simple line. Message me. Might have something for you. It wasn't security. It wasn't a solution, but it was something. I closed the library computer and stepped outside. The sun was warmer now, climbing higher, spreading across the steps. I sat down, letting the light hit my face. For a moment, I let myself breathe without fear dragging at my ribs. They took me out of their photos. They won't take me out of my future. And that morning, without a home or a dollar to my name, someone unexpected reached out. I was still sitting on the front steps of the library, the cheap sandwich wrapper folded in my lap, when I felt my phone buzz. My thumb hovered over the screen for a moment before I swiped it open. It was a notification from the coding forum. One reply, from a user called Northbound Craft. Saw your post. I might have something for you. Nothing big, but paid. I read it again. Then a third time. Could have been spam. Could have been someone messing with me. But in that moment, it felt like oxygen. I messaged back, careful to be transparent. Thanks for reaching out. I only have access to Wi-Fi at public spots, mostly the library. I can send over snippets from past school projects if needed, just simple app interfaces and a few back-end logic tasks. A few minutes passed. I stared at the blinking cursor, heartbeat in my ears. Then came a reply. That's fine. Impressive you're this polished already. Didn't expect someone your age. I wasn't sure whether to be flattered or suspicious. Still, the conversation kept going. We exchanged a few more messages. He explained he ran a small custom furniture business and needed some help with a scheduling tool on his website. Nothing complex, just a simple back-end page where clients could book a time and request a quote. You local? He asked. I said I was around Cleveland. Let's meet up. Face-to-face is better for this sort of thing. He offered the name of a cafe across town. Said it was safe, open during lunch. I agreed. It was a long walk, just over 40 minutes, dragging my suitcase behind me through cracked sidewalks and unfamiliar intersections. But I made it. The cafe sat on the corner of a quiet street, lined with brick storefronts and leafy trees that threw shadows on the pavement. It wasn't flashy, just clean, comfortable, real. Inside, the air smelled like espresso and cinnamon. Soft jazz played overhead. No one stared at me when I walked in, even with my wrinkled hoodie and bag. That alone made it feel different from my parents' house. He was already there. Mid to late 30s, I guessed. Tall, rugged without trying. Faint lines at the corners of his eyes, not from age, but from squinting in sunlight. His plaid shirt had sawdust on the sleeve. Not a businessman, a worker. He stood and offered his hand. Martin Hale, he said. Keller. His handshake was steady, firm, but not a test of dominance like my father always gave. We sat. He didn't order anything fancy, just coffee. I passed on food, pretending I wasn't hungry even though my stomach had been growling since sunrise. Martin didn't waste time. He opened his laptop and showed me his current site. Clean layout, but outdated functionality. Then he scrolled to a Word doc with notes in plain language. I'm not looking for flash, he said. Just something simple that works. Back-end page. Client calendar. Maybe a button to upload photos if they want custom pieces. I nodded slowly, eyes on the screen. I understood every line. I can do that, I said. His eyebrows rose a little. You sure? I swallowed the lump in my throat. Yeah, I've built something like this before for a school project. He leaned back. Tell you what. I'll pay cash. Half now, half when it's done. Not a fortune, but better than exposure and empty promises. He slid a folded 20 across the table. I stared at it for a second longer than I should have before picking it up and slipping it into my pocket. Thank you, I said, too quietly. He caught the edge of something in my voice, didn't press, just sipped his coffee, then asked, You still in school? Graduated yesterday. Ah, college next? I hesitated. Not exactly. Trying to do my own thing. He nodded slowly. Family support you in that? I didn't answer right away. They had other plans for me. Martin's eyes didn't pry. He just said, Sometimes family holds you down more than strangers ever will. I couldn't help it. My breath caught just a little. I didn't expect kindness from a man I'd just met. Not the kind that comes with no strings. Back at the library, I threw myself into the code. For hours, I forgot where I was. Forgot the stiff chairs, the hunger that kept nudging me, even the ache behind my eyes. The interface came together fast. I knew exactly how to build the tool Martin needed. I worked with focus I hadn't felt in weeks. Around mid-afternoon, I took a short break and checked my phone. That's when I saw it. A post in the neighborhood Facebook group my mother always used. One of the women from church, someone who used to call me sweetheart when I was little, had posted a photo from the ceremony. The caption read, Prayers for the Marsh family. Their youngest son ran away right after graduation. They're devastated. I stopped breathing. More comments followed. Such a shock. Ruth Ann said he didn't even come home after. Poor Corwin. She said he just vanished. She told me he's been troubled for a while now. Troubled. Vanished. Not once did anyone say he was kicked out. Not one person mentioned that my father had tossed my bag onto the lawn, or that my mother had thrown the house key at my feet like trash. I scrolled further. My mother had commented under the post, a photo of her from church, face tilted just right, red eyes like she'd been crying. We're doing our best to forgive. He chose to leave. We still pray for his safety. My hands clenched the phone so tight the edges bit into my palms. They didn't just erase me. They replaced the truth. I whispered the words, slow and steady, like a vow. They wanted sympathy. They wanted people to believe I was ungrateful, that they'd tried, that I rejected them, not the other way around. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I wouldn't crawl back, wouldn't give them one single moment of, we told you so. Later that afternoon, I walked back to the cafe. The sun had started dipping lower in the sky, golden light brushing the windows. Martin was waiting inside. He didn't ask questions when I handed over the USB with the early version of the tool. He plugged it into his laptop, clicked around, nodded once. You're good. Then he reached into his wallet and handed me the second half of the payment. And this, he said, pulling a wrapped sandwich from a paper bag, is not charity. It's lunch. Eat it. Works easier when you're not starving. I wanted to say something clever, something that matched the weight of the moment, but all I managed was, thanks. He nodded. I've been where you are. Different reasons. Same feeling. No pity in his voice, just honesty, decency. Something I hadn't felt from an adult in a long time. Outside the cafe, I sat on the bench, the sandwich warm in my hands, a few bills in my pocket. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Earned. Chosen. They want a story where I failed. I'll write one where I rose. And that night, while I coded under the library's fluorescent lights, someone else from my past decided to interfere. The building had mostly emptied out by then. Fluorescent bulbs hummed quietly overhead. The air felt cooler, not from the temperature, but from the absence of people. A kind of stillness that made even my own breathing feel loud. I sat hunched over the library table, third one from the back, where the only working wall outlet lived. My laptop was plugged in, cursor blinking steadily as I added another function to Martin's scheduling tool. My fingers moved slowly but methodically. It was work I understood. Clean logic, input, output. No manipulation, no shame coded in the margins. My eyes burned from staring at the screen too long. I rubbed them, blinked hard, sipped from a paper cup of stale water I'd filled in the bathroom sink. The tiredness wasn't just physical, it was bone deep, like my body couldn't tell whether I'd slept last night or last year. But even that ache felt better than sitting in silence, remembering how my mother's voice sounded when she told me to leave. So I kept coding. Martin had emailed earlier with a few adjustments. I added a custom field to the booking form, made the layout more responsive on mobile, and added a redirect page with a thank you message. Nothing fancy, but neat. Stable. Around 10, I paused to stretch my neck and check my messages. A new notification. One of my classmates, Aaron, had sent me a screenshot. No caption, just an image and a single word. Seriously? I tapped it open. The post was from a church-run Facebook group. I recognized the account, Lisa Taylor, one of my mom's longtime friends. She used to bring us homemade pies at Thanksgiving, the kind with the too sweet meringue. Her profile photo was a cross wrapped in roses. Pray for the lost. Beneath the caption sat a blurred image. It took me a second to realize it was me, taken from behind, walking alone near the edge of the graduation crowd. I felt my stomach tighten. The comments were worse. My mother's name, right there, public, bold. We have tried everything. Keller has fallen into bad influences. He refuses help. He has pushed his family away. Then another comment from my father. We hope he realizes life out there is hard. Maybe he needs to learn on his own. The thread kept growing. Words like troubled, heartbreaking, and pray for healing. I could barely scroll. Each comment was like another hand shoving me back into the box they always tried to force me into, the one where I was ungrateful, wayward, ungrateful, damaged. I whispered, barely audible even to myself, "They're destroying me so people won't ask what they did." The keyboard under my fingers blurred. Not from tears. I hadn't cried yet. It was worse than that. Like my entire sense of being was starting to collapse inward, quiet and slow, like a building crumbling from the basement. No noise, just dust and weight. I closed the laptop, gathered my things. I didn't want anyone to see me break. Out in the hallway, under the dim emergency exit light, I slid down to the cold floor, back against the wall. Hands pressed against my thighs. My breath came short. I didn't sob. I couldn't. It was like the crying had been frozen somewhere inside me, unreachable. They hadn't just erased me from their story. Now they were replacing me with a version that served them better, a version people would pity them for. The buzz in my pocket broke the silence. I glanced down. My sister. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe an apology. Maybe I saw the post. That's not okay. Just something human. The message lit up the screen. Mom says you're hurting their reputation. If you cared about this family, you'd come home and apologize. You made this mess. My jaw clenched. Another vibration. And stop telling people they kicked you out. That makes you look desperate. I stared at those words until the screen dimmed. Then I pressed the lock button. Hard. That was it. The last line between me and any hope of being understood by someone in that house. Gone. She chose the version of the story that made them look good. The one where I was the mistake, not the symptom of a broken system they refused to look at. I got up and walked outside. The night air hit me like cold glass. The street was mostly empty, save for a city bus rumbling by in the distance. The library stairs were steep, wide. I leaned against the handrail, feeling the metal bite into my palm. That message, that thread, it hurt more than the night they told me to leave. That was just final. This was betrayal written in real time. Ongoing. My legs were shaking now from exhaustion or rage. I couldn't tell. I thought about giving up, going back, just to stop the bleeding. And then I heard it. My father's voice, like an echo stamped into the back of my skull. You'll crawl back. That sentence, not shouted, not dramatic, just matter of fact, like he knew the world would break me down until I came running. I gripped the rail tighter. I whispered through clenched teeth, no, I won't. Back inside, I found my seat again. The laptop screen lit up. I pulled my notebook out, the one with all the sketches and ideas I used to draw at night when no one was watching. I flipped to a blank page, and I wrote, in all caps, underlined twice, I won't go back. That's where it started. Not with a job, not with a meal, but with a refusal. Because if I went back, they'd win. And not just win. They'd believe they were right. That I wasn't strong enough to stand on my own. That I couldn't survive without their control. I stayed there at the table another hour, refining the code, fixing bugs, adding features, line by line, letter by letter. It wasn't just a project anymore. It was proof. Proof I existed. Proof I had value. Proof I could build something they couldn't erase. But just when I thought I was gaining control, they did something I never saw coming. The sun was already stretching across the sidewalk when I left the library that morning. It had rained overnight, just enough to make the pavement smell like wet stone. I had barely gotten 2 hours of sleep slumped over my backpack, but something about the light felt different. Not warm exactly, but not hostile either. I walked to the cafe where I'd met Martin. It was about 40 minutes on foot, maybe a little longer with my legs dragging from the lack of rest. Still, the thought of finishing the final updates to his scheduling tool gave me something to focus on. Something I could control. The place wasn't crowded. A couple of older men played chess by the window. A woman near the counter was working on her knitting. I ordered a small black coffee, cheapest thing on the menu, then found a spot in the corner near an outlet. As I powered up my laptop, a message came through. Martin. Looking great so far. Seriously, Keller, you've got a good mind. I stared at that for a few seconds longer than I probably should have. Just reading those words made my chest tighten in a way I wasn't used to. Not because they hurt, but because they didn't. I'd spent years trying to earn a compliment like that from people who wouldn't give me the time of day. It was quiet, calm. I started typing. A few bug fixes, a field alignment tweak. I didn't notice the time passing until a loud tap rattled the window near my head. I flinched. Outside stood a woman in a burgundy coat, her face aged but familiar, lips pinched, hair sprayed into place like it might shatter. Mrs. Larson, church friend, my mom's right hand for years. Always the first to host a prayer circle, the first to drop off casseroles when someone in the congregation got sick. She waved with urgency, motioning for me to come out. I didn't move. Another tap. Harder this time. The woman knitting looked up. I heard someone mutter near the counter. My stomach dropped. I shut my laptop and stood up, every part of me screaming not to go. But I did, because people like her don't leave until you give them what they came for. Outside, she didn't smile. "Young man," she began, not bothering with a greeting. "Your parents are beside themselves. What you've put them through, shameful." I blinked at her. "They're the ones who kicked me out," I said, voice low. "I didn't choose this." She crossed her arms. "That's not what they told me. Your mother is heartbroken. They say you've changed, that you're pushing everyone away." I swallowed back the heat rising in my throat. She fumbled in her purse and pulled out her phone. "I didn't come here to argue. I came because they're worried," she said, tapping the screen. A message thread opened up. From Mom. "If you see Keller, try to talk sense into him. He's lost. We're afraid of what this will do to our family's name. Please, if you can bring him home." I stared at it. The air around me felt tighter, like the sidewalk was shrinking. She hadn't come on her own. She was sent, like some kind of messenger, a hunter, maybe. "I'm not going back," I said. My voice didn't sound strong, but it was clear. Mrs. Larson looked stunned. "So you're really throwing it all away? After everything they've given you?" "No," I replied, standing straighter. "They threw me away. I'm just making sure I don't end up where I started." Her expression turned cold. "Well," she muttered, "I hope you enjoy this little phase of rebellion. It won't last." She turned and walked off without another word. I stood there, frozen, while cars passed behind me. A couple walking their dog stared as they passed. I could feel their eyes on me, like fingerprints. Back inside, my hands trembled as I opened my laptop again. I told myself I'd be fine, that she didn't matter. But I couldn't stop picturing her face, the smug pity. Like I was some broken thing being gossiped about behind polite smiles. That's when my phone lit up again. "Martin, can we talk for a sec?" I grabbed my bag and stepped outside again, answering the call with a knot forming in my stomach. His voice came through, calm but cautious. "Hey, Keller, I wanted to check in. Something strange happened." I stood still, my free hand in my pocket. "What do you mean?" "Well, I got a call. From your mom." I didn't say anything. "She said she found my business through Facebook. Claimed she was just concerned. Told me you'd been lying. Said you were unstable, manipulative, that I shouldn't give you money." I closed my eyes. Every muscle in my back tensed. "She actually said that?" "Word for word. Then she told me that if you ask for anything, payment, help, I should say no. That you need tough love." I didn't know what to say. I felt hollow, like my voice had fallen out of my throat and shattered on the sidewalk. "I never asked you for anything," I managed to say, "except a chance to prove I could work." Martin paused, then let out a slow sigh. "I know, kid, and I didn't believe a word she said." His voice was firmer now. "Look, you've done great work. I'm not pulling back. Just be aware, all right? They're trying to shut down every path you find. You gotta stay sharp." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Thanks, Martin." "No need to thank me. Just finish strong." I ended the call and stared out at the street, watching a group of teenagers laugh as they crossed the road, their backpacks bouncing, their voices carefree. That used to be me. But now, this was war. Not loud, not violent, but constant, subtle, strategic. I walked back inside and picked up where I left off. Not because I felt brave, but because I didn't know what else to do. I added the final features to the tool: form validations, confirmation email system, mobile layout tweak. Each line of code felt like an act of defiance. They wanted to make me small, to make me dependent, quiet, ashamed. But every function I wrote was proof I was still here, still standing, still building something they couldn't tear down with gossip or manipulation. If they wanted to destroy me, they should have done it before I knew what I was capable of. Because now, I wasn't just surviving. I was fighting back, in the only way I knew how. But the harder I worked, the more desperate they became, and their next move crossed a line I never imagined. By early afternoon, the wind had shifted. It was the kind of chill that sneaks up on you, not enough to see your breath, but enough to make you pull your sleeves down and bury your hands in your pockets. I was headed back to the library, hoping to print a few PDFs and polish the last deliverables for Martin's site before heading back to the apartment. When I stepped inside, the building was warmer than usual and smelled faintly of dust and printer ink. A few college kids were hunched over study guides, tapping highlighters against their laptops. I nodded to the older librarian at the front desk, Ms. Ramirez, I think was her name, when she looked up. "Someone dropped this off for you," she called out, holding a white envelope. I froze. The way she said it, it didn't sound casual, more like she was unsure whether giving it to me was a good idea. She handed it over without another word. My name was written across the front in familiar, sharp handwriting. My mother's. I didn't even need to open it. The weight of the thing told me enough. I slipped into one of the quiet back booths where I used to study when I still thought I was part of something normal. I stared at the envelope, fingers trembling, teeth clenched. Eventually, I broke the seal. The letter was typed. Cold. Structured like a business memo. Formal to the point of cruelty. You have disrespected the Marsh family. Your actions have caused humiliation and unnecessary concern. You are neglecting your responsibilities as a son. If you continue this behavior, we will be forced to take steps you will not like. It was signed at the bottom, both names. Dad's signature still big and slanted like always. Mom's tight and sharp. I should have stopped reading there. But a second page peeked out. Folded behind the first was a photocopy of a church bulletin. I unfolded it with a sense of dread already building in my chest. There it was, under prayer requests in bold font. Please pray for our son, Keller Marsh, who has fallen into instability and rejected his upbringing. We believe God can still bring him back to the path of righteousness. I read it once, then again, then a third time. Instability, rejected his upbringing. They weren't just twisting the story anymore. They were broadcasting it. My name, my supposed mental state, my abandonment of their values. Hundreds of families I grew up around, read that bulletin every week. Some of them had known me since I was in kindergarten. I could picture the faces, the quiet, bless his heart, pity, the whispers after service. I didn't realize I'd dropped the letter until I heard it flutter to the carpet. My hands were trembling too hard to hold anything. I gripped the edge of the table, willing myself not to break in front of anyone. And still, someone noticed. A woman across the aisle, maybe in her 60s, leaned over slightly. "Sweetheart, are you all right?" she asked gently. I nodded quickly, scooping the letter off the ground, trying to shove everything back in my backpack without looking her in the eye. "Fine. Just tired." I rushed out before she could ask anything else. Outside, the air hit harder than before. The sky had gone gray, like the sun had given up trying. I walked aimlessly toward the edge of downtown, trying to slow my thoughts. It wasn't about me being rebellious anymore, or disappointing them. This was surgical, strategic. They weren't trying to bring me home. They were trying to ruin any chance I had of standing tall anywhere else. I stopped near a fountain that hadn't run in months and sat on a cold stone bench, letting the wind push past me like I wasn't even there. Then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Martin. Hey, odd question. Did your family post something about you? Someone forwarded me a church bulletin with your name in it. My heart stilled. Another ping. Martin. Screenshot attached. Same bulletin. Same words. Only now it had my name tagged in a public Cleveland neighborhood Facebook group. I recognized it. It was the one Mrs. Larson moderated. This wasn't gossip. It was a campaign. A coordinated effort to poison every place I might land. Every person I might meet. They didn't want me back. They just wanted to make sure no one else took me in. My chest ached, not with sadness, but something else. Something sharper, cleaner. Rage. Not the wild kind I'd felt as a kid, throwing a book across the room or slamming a door. This was different. This was steady. Cold. It didn't shake me. It anchored me. They want to make sure anywhere I go, I muttered aloud. I'm already ruined. I sat there a long time, watching people walk past, none of them noticing a boy on a bench holding fury in his lungs like it was air. Then, for the first time, I felt something new beneath the anger. Clarity. They were acting out of desperation, lashing out because their grip was slipping. They thought I'd fold under the pressure, crawl back, beg forgiveness. Let them rewrite history while I stood there silent. They were wrong. I walked back to the apartment, borrowed still, but quiet. Safe. Mine in the only way that mattered. I pulled out a folder from my backpack. Inside it, I slipped the letter, the bulletin, the screenshot Martin sent. On the tab, I wrote in ink, insurance. They'd crossed a line. And I finally understood I couldn't just keep dodging punches. I needed to build something they couldn't reach. Not just code, not just cash. A name, a life, a version of myself no newsletter could undo. Later that night, I sat at the small desk by the window and opened my laptop. The keys felt different under my fingers, less like a tool, more like a weapon. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then whispered, if they want a war, I'll give them a legacy instead. And the very next morning, they crossed a boundary that turned this into something far bigger than family conflict. The call came just after 7:00 a.m., before the sun had fully climbed above the skyline. I saw the number flashing on my screen even before my eyes adjusted to the light. I knew it immediately. Mark Hepler, my parents' longtime attorney. The man who used to stop by our house every Christmas with a bottle of wine and stories about the cost of bad decisions. He hadn't called me in years. I stared at the missed call, heart pounding, then tapped the voicemail. Keller. His voice was taut. No preamble. Call me back right away. Your parents have filed a legal claim involving misuse of family resources. You'll need representation. I sat upright in bed, still holding the phone to my ear as the message ended. For a full minute, I couldn't move. Couldn't even breathe right. Then I called him back, hands ice cold. He answered quickly. I'm going to be frank with you, he said. They've alleged that you stole proprietary intellectual property that belongs to the Marsh household, as well as publicly defaming their name. They're calling my work theft? I asked. They're calling your entire life a liability, he said quietly. For a second, I was floating, like my body was still sitting on the bed. But my mind had drifted somewhere high and unreal. They weren't just discrediting me in church circles now. They were trying to erase everything I'd built. I ended the call without another word, stood up, and sank to the apartment floor. My chest felt too tight to breathe properly. It didn't matter that the accusations were absurd, that they had no claim on my work. All it took was enough people hearing the lie first. They weren't punishing me. They were ensuring no one else trusted me again. After maybe half an hour of sitting motionless, I stood up and washed my face with freezing tap water. Looked at myself in the mirror. "You wanted a war," I whispered. I threw on a sweatshirt and walked. No destination in mind, just forward. The wind off the lake cut through my sleeves and stung my cheeks, but I didn't care. I needed the cold. It made everything sharper. I walked past the old pier, past where my mom used to take us for 4th of July fireworks, past the church with the peeling red doors, the same one from the bulletin. Everything suddenly felt connected. The gossip, the bulletin, the staged prayer circles, and now the legal trap. They weren't acting in panic. They were executing a plan. By the time I reached the edge of downtown, I pulled out my phone and dialed Martin. "We need to meet," I said, voice flat. He didn't ask questions. "Same cafe?" "Yeah, 10 minutes. I turned back and cut across the side streets, making it in under 15. Martin was already there, at the corner booth, sipping coffee like nothing was wrong. But when he saw my face, his expression shifted. I dropped into the seat across from him and opened my backpack, pulled out the folder. "This is everything," I said. "Letters, church bulletins, screenshots, and now they're coming at me legally. They're accusing me of stealing ideas, of ruining their name." Martin didn't touch the folder. He listened, and when I finished, he leaned forward. "Keller," he said, "you know what your parents don't understand?" "What?" "That you're not just building code. You're building proof. Proof of who you are, and they can't stand that." He looked at me with something new in his eyes, not pity, not concern. Something sharper, strategic. "I've been thinking," he said. "That scheduling tool, it's solid, but I've got something bigger in mind. I was going to pitch it to someone else, but after watching you work," he paused, "I want you to co-develop it with me." I blinked. "What is it?" He explained. "An operations platform for small business supply chains. Smart routing, task optimization, all tailored for underserved regional businesses. A system built to scale nationally." "You really think I can do that?" I asked. Martin nodded. "You're the only person I've met who works like someone nobody ever believed in. That's who I need." Before I could even respond, my phone buzzed violently on the table. Then again, and again. 3 notifications, 5, 8. Messages from people I hadn't spoken to since high school. From a neighbor who used to bring over cookies every Christmas. From a church member I barely remembered. "Hey Keller, are you okay? This can't be real, right? I saw something your mom posted. I'm so sorry." I opened one of the links, a public post. My parents' names right at the top, shared across a community Facebook page that included people from 5 different counties. "Keller Marsh has refused help for his worsening condition. We ask our friends and neighbors to pray for our family's safety. We believe in healing. We believe in truth." Attached was a photo, me, age 14, crying during a church retreat. I hadn't even known someone had taken that picture. I stood up so fast the chair legs screeched. "They're destroying me," I said. "Not just lying. not just twisting. They're lighting matches. Martin put a hand on my shoulder. Then burn their narrative down. I pulled the folder closer. I've been collecting all of it. Every smear, every threat, every whisper. He looked at me, eyes narrowing. You've documented all of it? I nodded. I'm done being their victim. We left the cafe right then, got into Martin's car, and drove to a law firm he trusted downtown. I held the folder like a lifeline the entire ride. The office was quiet, professional. A woman named Elise reviewed my materials. Her eyes widened as she flipped through page after page. She looked up slowly. You may have a stronger case than you realize, she said. That afternoon, we filed the first wave. A cease and desist. A formal demand for retraction. A counterclaim for reputational harm and emotional distress. I signed my name on the bottom line with a pen that didn't shake once. When we stepped back out into the cold, the sun was fading, turning the sky a pale orange. The wind hadn't let up. Part of me mourned as I walked down the icy sidewalk, mourned the version of myself who still thought, even a month ago, that maybe all of this could be solved with an apology, a sit-down, a conversation. But that boy was gone. In his place stood someone who understood one thing clearly. They'd tried to control me, but instead, they'd forged my spine. But even as I took my first real stand, I didn't know the cost, and the price would come due sooner than I expected. That morning, I opened my apartment door to find an envelope lying on the doormat. No postage, just my name written in a hand I hadn't seen in months. My father's handwriting, shaky now but still unmistakable in its formality. I stared at it for a long time before picking it up. The flap was sealed, neat, intentional. I brought it inside and placed it on the kitchen table like it might burn through the wood. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I made coffee, washed 2 dishes in the sink, and stood by the window as steam rose from the mug. The envelope waited, and when I finally sat down, hands resting on the table's edge, I hesitated again. I wasn't scared of what it might say. I was scared of who I might become if I let it sink in, but I opened it anyway. The letter was written on the kind of cream stationery my parents always used for formal thank you notes and holiday cards. The tone matched. Stiff, measured, careful. Keller, it began. We've had time to reflect on the events of the past few weeks. Your mother is not well. She's been overwhelmed. I kept reading. We did not anticipate this level of escalation. We're not proud of everything that's happened, but we are still your parents. Come home. Let's put an end to this before more damage is done. No real apology, just a nervous attempt to stop the bleeding. They weren't sorry. They were scared. Not once did the letter mention what they had done. No reference to the prayer bulletins, the legal threats, the social posts with that old photo. Just fear wrapped in formal language. At the bottom, both their names, signed in ink that had smudged slightly near the edges. Tucked behind the first page, I noticed something else. A smaller slip of paper, torn from what looked like a printed email or perhaps a newsletter draft. It read, "Please pray for our son, Keller. He continues to struggle with misunderstandings and emotional instability. We trust God has a plan." And there it was again. That phrase, "You always misunderstand our intentions." My mother had said it for years. When I asked why she told the pastor I had withdrawn from reality. When she justified throwing out my journals. When I found out she had been talking to my friends behind my back. It was always that line, that dismissal. Seeing it now didn't hurt. It clarified everything. I wasn't the same boy anymore, and she wasn't changing. I folded the letter, stood, and placed it back in the envelope. My phone buzzed from the counter. 5 missed calls, all from her. And then the voicemail played automatically. Keller, please. We didn't mean for this to go so far. Call us back. We just want to talk. Her voice shook, but there was no warmth in it, only strain. It sounded like someone trying to keep control of a story that was falling apart. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table again, staring out the window. A few birds had landed on the ledge, pecking at invisible crumbs. In another life, it would have felt peaceful. Then another buzz. This time, a message. But not from them. It was from an old neighbor, Mrs. Callahan. She and her husband used to live 2 houses down. Keller, I saw the bulletin. I'm so sorry. That was wrong of them. Then another, a church volunteer. We didn't know what was really happening. People are talking now. If you need anything, I'm here. The dam had cracked, not because my parents admitted anything, but because truth has its own rhythm. And when you fight it long enough, it fights back. Later that afternoon, I walked to Elisa's law office and slid the envelope across her desk. She scanned the letter, the attached slip. This confirms what we suspected, she said. They're trying to appear remorseful without liability, but the pressure's working. They didn't expect you to hold your ground. We reviewed our timeline, confirmed the filing status. Then I left. The sky was starting to dim when I met Martin at the cafe. He ordered tea. I didn't order anything. They're reaching out now? He asked. Yeah, I said, trying to smooth it all over. Classic move. First they strip your name. Then they offer a handshake and hope you'll forget. I nodded. He leaned forward. This is the first time they've seen who you really are. I let out a quiet breath. Then they're seeing me for the first time. We didn't talk long, just enough to confirm our next planning session and exchange a look that said, we're still building, no matter what. That night, back in the apartment, I sat with the envelope again, turned it over, pressed the crease with my thumb. I thought about who I used to be, 17 and unsure, graduated and discarded, told I was too soft, too strange, too much. Told I'd crawl back. But here I was, not crawling, not begging, just choosing. I pulled out a sheet of printer paper and wrote a short reply. I wish you well. I'm choosing a different life now. I folded it, sealed it in a blank envelope, and dropped it in the outgoing mail slot in the apartment hallway. Then I returned to my phone, blocked both numbers, not in anger, out of peace. It was nearly midnight when I found myself walking again, this time back to the lakefront. The wind rolled off the water in steady waves. It tugged at my sleeves, pushed my hood back, but I didn't mind. It felt clean, honest. And for once, the quiet didn't feel like exile. It felt like presence. The next morning, I met Martin again. We had a whiteboard, a laptop, 3 cups of coffee between us, and a folder of sketches he'd drawn the night before. We brainstormed for hours, built timelines, delegated roles. By the time we parted ways in the early afternoon, we weren't just working. We were creating something with momentum, something mine, something real. As I walked back toward my place, a thought settled over me like the late autumn breeze. I didn't crawl back. I built forward. And for the first time in my life, there was peace.